Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the October 3rd meeting of the Economic Matters Committee. Currently present here are myself and Alderman Savage. We appreciate folks' flexibility with the change in date and time from our traditional meeting slot. All right, first on the agenda is the approval of the agenda. And I am actually going to make one amendment. I am going to remove ID-79-23, the Annapolis Ahead 2040 Economic Development Approach. This is due to Mr. Lashinsky already giving a presentation to our committee earlier on the comprehensive plan. And conversations with him, he has said there would not be any additional information at this time. So, do I have a motion to approve the agenda as amended?
I would like to amend it as well to add the appointment of Ms. Kimberly Golder, AP 32-23. It's on this agenda, but apparently it wasn't on the one that went to the public yesterday or a couple days ago.
Thank you for catching that. I will second that motion, and it is added. So, do we have any additional amendments to the agenda? All right. Do I have a motion to approve the agenda as amended?
So moved.
I will second. All in favor?
Aye.
All right. The agenda is approved as amended. So, first we have the approval of the minutes from our last meeting back in April 19th. Do I have a motion to approve?
So moved.
I will second. All in favor?
Aye.
All right. Up next, we have... Do we need a roll call? I guess, yeah. Aye and aye.
Do I have to roll call? No, I know.
It's easy enough. Alderman Savage and myself approve, and Alderman Gay is not present, so 2-0. All right, first up on the agenda is AP 3223, appointment to the Historic Preservation Commission, Mr. Kimberly Golder. Welcome.
Hello, thank you.
So, Ms. Golder, we appreciate your interest in this commission. Something I usually like to do when I have folks come before us is just introduce yourself to us, tell us some of your qualifications and why you're interested in this position. That's probably what I think is one of the most important things. So let's just get it out of the way first.
Okay, my name is Kimberly Mosley Golder. I'm here. Excellent. Now I'm probably super loud. So my name is Kimberly Mosley Golder. I am a Ward 4 resident. I have lived here for over 20 years. I commuted from here. I love the city of Annapolis so much that I rewarded myself by moving all the way out here and having to work all the way in DC. So you can tell that I am truly committed to this place and space that not only did we choose to move to, but to raise our children. Our children have only known Annapolis as their home, and they both have attended the area public schools where they both have flourished through the IB program. I am a retired Deputy Chief United States Probation Officer. I have 26 years worth of experience, and the majority of that has been in senior management positions. Having the large span of control, having knowledge, skills, and abilities of how to coach, mentor, motivate individuals, how to work on large and small scale programs, dealing with funding issues, having worked with space and facilities, whether it is downsizing space or increasing space, building out space, terminating contracts for lease space. I've had the opportunity to work at the level of position that I was in. I was, in addition to being a branch chief, in addition to being a deputy chief, I was the branch chief at the national headquarters for federal probation and pretrial services, where I was over supervision for the United States, Guam, Puerto Rico, and the Virgin Islands. All of the administrators rolled up to me that were over every aspect you can imagine as it pertains to supervising federal individuals, those under federal supervision. And I did that role for 16 years. The reason I'm interested in this position is because I truly believe that my span of experience, I have a high commitment to volunteerism. I am a member of Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated, where I have participated in a variety of public service and commitment to public service and giving back to the community. I'm also a member of the Links Incorporated here in Annapolis, where we work with Annapolis High School and their in their program that they have for underserved youths that are often first-time college students. I'm the president of Jack and Jill of America, which is the organization that is here in Anne Arundel County. I'm also on the Annapolis Democratic Central Committee. I'm the secretary for the Central Committee. So as you can see, as it is a running joke in my household, I have a lot of free jobs. And apparently I haven't reached my limit because I am interested in giving back. But my desire to give back, in addition to having volunteered at Annapolis High School for the past 6 years, my desire to give back is another part of my reason for wanting to be on this committee. I do have an extreme commitment to giving back to the area and place and space where I live, where we are raising our children. And so my desire to serve yet again in another capacity is the reason that I'm interested. And I believe that the broad wealth of experience that I have over the course of my professional career and my volunteer career would be of assistance to the commission.
Thank you very much. You have quite the resume, and I am a fellow commute to DC for the day job person. You a bus driver, metro rider, drive it all the way in?
Oh, I drove the whole way because I never knew if I'd get a call from the daycare when the kids were little or in high school. So I just had to suck it up and go all the way, which was a challenge.
I'm hoping for more fellow bus riders in positions of power. All right, Alderman Savage, do you have any questions for Ms. Golder?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Turn off my mic. Thank you, Mr. Chair. And thank you for your interest in serving. I can see your entire application. So thank you. Caitlin here got it sorted out for us. So you do have very extensive background, and I do want to, because this is one of the few commission positions that do require a certain background in particular areas or an interest. And so could you expand upon either because you do mention in here a bit that you do have experience in the areas of planning, design, conservation, environmental concerns. Could you expand upon that a bit and why you chose your interest particularly with the HPC?
So yes, again, through my work in the federal government and the various organizations that I've worked with, and I am so mad I'm drawing a blank on where my daughter was today on a field trip, but it's all about preservation. It's right here, and I'm drawing a blank. I know you all probably know the name of that park, but we've done a lot of work there with them and their conservation and how they're trying to make the Chesapeake thrive and better and clean it up and so forth. So it's always been a passion and interest of mine. My children, when they were little, we taught them very early about taking care of the planet and all. And so it's not just something that is of interest to me, it's something that we have encouraged our children to participate in. When it comes to space and planning, like I said, I've participated in design and architectural design. Oftentimes when it comes to historical courthouses where we are expanding space and making sure that you're knowledgeable. I've worked with contracting, multi-million and billion-dollar federal government contracts. When you're writing up RFPs and reviewing RFPs and being knowledgeable about them as it pertains to space and facilities, but also when we're talking about using products that are going to be good for the environment, and that gets to the conservation. All of the organizations that I listed that I'm a member of, all of them have a conservation component and interest that I have been a part of.
If I may ask, what courthouses have you worked on? That's actually a really interesting fact that I didn't see on your resume.
Yeah, so I've worked in the Albert V. Bryant Courthouse, which is in Alexandria, Virginia, and the Pettyman Courthouse, which is in Washington, D.C., that you've seen on the news a considerable amount recently. And I worked at the national headquarters, the Administrative Office of the U.S. Courts, which is the Thurgood Marshall Federal Judiciary Building. If you are in D.C., at Union Station, to the right of Union Station is a beautiful white building with a glass atrium with palm trees, which is really random and interesting considering it is DC. But they're in the atrium, and that's the building that I worked a considerable amount of time when I was the branch chief.
Awesome. So much I apologize, I jumped over.
No problem. So I guess I'm glad to hear you have some of the background for environmental. What, in particular, can you expand upon the historic preservation component, either your interest or background in that part of it?
Yeah, so the interest in preservation started with the Chesapeake. And my kids and their school, they went to West Annapolis. And so we had a partnership at that time with, it's right down here on Forest Drive, and I hate that the preservatory that's right down here on Forest Drive, it overlooks the water. And we did several volunteer efforts with them on the Chesapeake. And that's where it started. That interest started, that's well over 10 years ago. And we as a family volunteered. We were very committed to the preservation. We are still involved, but one of my daughters have graduated and gone off to college, so she was one of the ones who, she was the most interested in it. But my youngest and I, we still do work with them. And like I said, the field trip she was on today had a lot to do with them looking out for the Bay. And so mine has been largely through volunteerism.
Okay, but that's good to hear. That's good to hear. But for the Historic Preservation Commission, they're not dealing very much at all with Chesapeake Bay.
Correct.
Right. So
Yes.
do you have background that's more oriented as far as tasks that they're going to be handling? Because they're handling primarily, downtown historical businesses, historical architecture standards, that kind of thing.
So my understanding is that one of the things that they would be looking at and have been discussing is about the water table, and also looking at building up and making that more viable, and concerns of the flooding and things that we have, looking at the buildings and whether or not it is okay if we see a building that is abandoned, and whether or not it falls in the purview of one that we could repurpose for something else, or if it must be protected. So when it comes to pouring through documents and understanding what the authority is, having worked with the federal courts, pouring through documents to determine what the authority is and whether or not this is a building that you can touch or you cannot touch, is something that I'm extremely versed in. So I do understand that they would be focusing more on protecting historic buildings, protecting when it comes to remodeling and resurfacing, and what all goes into preserving the integrity of the building and the space.
Thank you, Ms. Norwood-Savage. So something I appreciate about your background in working with courthouses, and why I really found that interesting, is because we do want to maintain a certain degree of historical charm with many of our older court buildings, while also making sure they're functional and adaptable to the needs of the present.
Absolutely.
So I appreciate that background. You are aware of the upcoming big lift that's going to be coming with the city dock renovation, and a lot of the working on projects that are going to come from that, the renovations of the Burtis House and the construction of the visitors center.
Yes.
You're aware of all that? Mm-hmm. Well, it's a heck of a job, and I appreciate your interest in it, and I am willing to ask for a motion for a favorable recommendation.
So moved.
I will second. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Congratulations. Your name will go up for a final vote to the city council on Monday of next week.
Monday.
All
next
right.
week.
So yes, you'll be up for a final vote on Monday, the 9th. Thank you for your interest.
Okay, and should I be present on Monday?
If you want to. We don't usually do these interview processes at the full
Okay,
city
so I would
council
just be in
meetings.
the audience, but that's not necessary. So I got, if I want to and I had a head shake, no. So,
Correct. If you would like to, you are more than welcome to.
But
If
it's
you would
not
like to come up during the general comment period and introduce yourself, you are more than welcome to. It is not required. We do not traditionally do these type of interviews like we do in committee for those final appointments. That said, it never hurts to have your face in front of us.
okay, sounds great. Thank you so much and thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. All righty, up next is O1023, allowing cigar lounges to serve alcoholic beverages. Alderwoman Tierney is the primary sponsor of this legislation. She has said she is not able to make it today, but has asked that we continue to debate and discuss it and try to get it out of committee if possible. I am a co-sponsor of it. One of the things that this does is that it defines cigar lounges as a separate type of use, I guess, and allowing them to serve alcoholic beverages. The sense being that when you just smoke a cigar, you want to pair it with a fine whiskey, a fine brandy, or some type of high-end liquor. I am personally in favor of this because I do think it increases flexibility for a business that's trying to do something neat and innovative, and I welcome any further discussion on this issue.
No concerns for me.
Excellent. If that is it, I am willing to put forward do we have a motion for a favorable recommendation for O1023?
So moved.
I will second. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Up next is O2223, business license, taxes and regulations, creation of art establishment, beer and wine license. Alderwoman Tierney is again the primary sponsor of this legislation. She is not here today. She has not commented on whether or not she wants us to go forward. That said, I do think this one is pretty clear. It pretty much just allows, gosh, why am I blanking on it? It allows a couple of our art establishments, such as Maryland Hall, to have a beer and wine license more permanently than constantly needing to apply for the one-time use license, which again just gives them a little more flexibility for the events that they have. The governor signed a bill, Senate Bill 472, at the state level, allowing this specifically for the Maryland Hall establishment. So to me, it's just keeping up with the state law. Alderman Savage, do you have any questions or thoughts on this legislation?
No, sir.
Excellent. So in that case, all those in favor, do I have a motion for a favorable recommendation?
So moved.
I will second. All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Excellent. Up next is O2323, Alcoholic Beverages Code Technical Corrections. This was reached out to me by the law office to update our code for a couple technical corrections. Ms. Ritter, are you willing to get into some of those corrections that are made?
Certainly. Cynthia Reuter, legislative and policy analyst in the Office of Law. When the Office of Law was working on the arts establishment liquor license, we found that over many, many years, changes had been made to the alcoholic beverage license section of the code in one area, but not in all areas that it needed to be updated. So we took that on, and then when we started looking around, we thought that it could be better categorized so it would be easier to understand. So we put all the Class B types of licenses under Class B, and et cetera like that. And that's basically it.
Could you elaborate on what Class B type of licenses means? Such as beer and wine. Beer, wine, spirits.
Yeah.
Sorry, I didn't mean to ask a gotcha.
The Bs, they're liquor licenses where you can serve liquor with food. And the different classifications are what days you could sell, what hours you can sell, and can you go to 2 o'clock? Do you have to close up at 10 o'clock? There's different categories for a lot of these different types of things. And, you know, is it just draft beer? Is it other types of beer? Is it wine? It's broken down a lot.
Okay, so it's basically, the Class B is essentially it's not like you're up until 2 a.m. cabaret style license. It's more beer, wine, spirits for events, usually ending around midnight
Yeah.
or earlier, correct? Okay,
Correct.
excellent. Alderman Savage, do you have any questions?
No, sir.
Excellent. Am I willing to hear a favorable recommendation from the floor?
So moved.
I will second. All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Up next, 3223, short-term rental licenses and regulations. Alderman Savage, this is your legislation. If you would like to discuss on it, and you've also brought forward some amendments. I don't know if you want to move those forward or just discuss them in general tonight, and all up to you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, just also, if I could start off with just giving a brief run on the legislation. What drove this is just some issues that came up actually in my neighborhood, where we had an owner of STRs, short-term rentals, basically finding loopholes to skirt around one of our primary requirements in our STR code, which is that in order to have an STR, you have to be a resident of the city, or you have to have a local property manager, and you can only have one short-term rental. But I had an instance where it was 3 people who all shared an LLC and were using different names on different applications and different ownership of different properties, and they didn't live here. I think we found addresses in California and Washington, D.C. and elsewhere, I think, and Maine or something, I forget. But in any case, they were clearly trying to skirt things, and they also tried to claim they had a local property manager but the address, when you looked into that, was at another short-term rental property that they owned. It wasn't even a commercial property. And so again, clearly they're trying to play games. And so I certainly don't have a problem with short-term rentals. I've stayed in them myself. I think it's a viable market to have, capacity to have locally. But I do think we need to make sure that they adhere to one of the principles that I think many of us agreed on, which was having one rental per owner. And so that's one of the things that this does, is just tighten up the code around that. Because just from speaking to staff, there were a lot of confusions about what needed to be on the application and what was required, what wasn't. The other part of it had to do with how to handle nuisance properties. And what I mean by that are those that have, an issue with noise violations. It could be just traffic impacts, a lot of cars that are blocking up streets and cul-de-sacs, but also public safety issues that may arise. And so I wanted to tighten up that language to make it clear to make some kind of standard where if there's a property that is a nuisance problem, that the department can revoke or suspend the permit. Now, that said, so that's basically, I think, highlights a lot of the changes. I know when you look at the legislation, it looks like a lot because it kind of rewrites everything to meet new formatting, just to help be easier to understand. But the original provisions, the original intent from the legislation back a couple years back is still there. It's just reworded. Now that said, I've found some other issues that need to be addressed through the amendments, but that's kind of the underlying intention. So I don't know, Mr. Chair, if you have any questions or concerns about the underlying intention.
Yes, I'm just going through the nuisance definitions now. I think the intention's pretty solid because, again, you have a clear workaround. I'm sure there's a couple other incidents going on out there. I think this legislation is noteworthy in the fact that we have had short-term property owners, short-term rental property owners come forward and either say, this is a good idea, or be neutral on it. So it's doing that. We do have some folks in the audience tonight, if they may be interested in testifying. If you are, we would have a 2-minute stopgap, and I am ruthless on my enforcement of the buzzer. If you could go up to the main podium, sir. All right, so as stated, anyone in the audience, you have a 2-minute limit. Please state your name and address in the record. And
thank you. Conrad Christopher Ledoux. I go by Chris. I live at 215 Severn Avenue in Eastport. I have one dwelling unit that is a short-term rental among my other long-term rentals. Thank you, Alderman Savage. As I spoke at council, the good hosts do want to also address the bad hosts, because we all get tainted with that, and we care about this city, and we are empathetic to the neighbors that get up that have problems on their particular block. So I think this is a good piece of legislation. I think it's fair, and I thank you for your willingness to consider all the perspectives in terms of considering some amendments to just clarify things. So I appreciate that. I will leave it at that. I will just tell you, though, since this is the Economic Matters Committee, as we're about to embark on a probably very long comprehensive plan discussion, the thing to think about when people get up and talk about these things is I've seen some very loud voices in one particular ward against micro hotels. I've seen them against inns, traditional inns, and controversy about whether they can host weddings and things like that. And then against STRs, and just looking at our economy here, outside of the Naval Academy, St. John's, the hospital, et cetera, it's tourism and destination. Something to think about as we move into comp plans, what's the right balance? Because I'm very concerned, you know my perspective, but I'm not a hotelier or an innkeeper, but nevertheless, you can't be against everything, right? And so we would look to your leadership in trying to find the right balance, or, in terms of the Economic Matters Committee focusing on the economy of the city. Thank you very much. I appreciate your time.
thank you, Mr. Ledoux.
Mr. Ledoux, could you verify your address for the record?
215 Severn Avenue, Eastport, 21403.
All right, thank you, Ms. Ledoux. So to get forward to a couple of concerns, but they are addressed by these amendments that we have kind of off to the side. I did have some concern about the vagueness of things on page 8, lines 7 through 18. Diminishes the value of neighboring property, is harmful to the public health, safety, or welfare of neighborhood residents, or obstructs the reasonable use of other property in the neighborhood. That is a vague statement, but in your list of amendments, you do acknowledge that and recommend removing that. Is that the correct interpretation that I'm having of that?
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
Excellent. So that's all I really have. I am okay with going forward on this legislation with the amendments typed off to the side, although if you want to have a little more time to get them formally introduced in the process, we can always vote to postpone action until next meeting. That is up to you. What are you comfortable with, Alderman Savage?
Well, yeah, I don't mind. I think if we took action on the underlying ordinance, but I'll take anything that comes out of the committee and work them into the final draft of the amendments, and I'll share them with you, Mr. Chair. And there's no rush, but I also don't want to unnecessarily hold things up. I don't think it's, so just to summarize, and I do want to take time to thank Mr. Ledoux for sending your comments, analysis to me. And I incorporated most, I think, of what you sent, but also some other comments I received from other folks in the city, just to tighten it up. And again, I think it all goes in the spirit of the same direction. There's only one thing, let's see. The other thing I kind of clarify in one of these amendments is that we need to better define the license, one of the terms, because right now you can get a license for multiple units on a property, even though there are multiple buildings. And so I don't think that's quite the intent. I think you can have multiple units inside a single building. And so, but that said, I did note at the end of this that one of the things I'm contemplating is, and again, this might be a separate matter, but allowing residents of the city to have multiple short-term rentals. Because I could see someone who, if someone lives locally and rents out their own, a couple rooms in their own house that they occupy, I could see it being completely legitimate if they have another property in the city that they want to rent as the non-owner occupied. I think it's different than having an outside investor.
I would put that as separate legislation. I see that as a little bit different from what you're trying to do here. A general commentary that I always have on our definition of short-term rentals is it's 180 days or less, which does not qualify for people on month-to-month leases. That is how I first came to this city. I was technically a dreaded short-term renter in my illegal apartment. So I guess I was a double whammy, but that's separate from this issue as well. So Alderman Savage, if you're comfortable with submitting these later on and just taking action on the primary piece of legislation, I am okay with that. And in that case, do I have a motion for a favorable recommendation on O3223?
So moved.
I will second. All of those in favor?
Aye.
All right, O3223 receives a favorable recommendation. Up next before the committee, ID 7823, Economic Development Update. Mr. Rice. Welcome, sir. Thank you for working with us on the due date in time. We appreciate everything you do.
Sure thing. Glad to be here, although a bit delayed. Well, just to start off, and you have the, I guess, the highlights of the report, I guess, in front of you, but things are going pretty well. It's the month of September was very busy. And just starting off with some statistics, the citywide combined commercial vacancy rate for September was 5.7%. We had 3 new businesses in the city and 1 business expanding or relocating. Economic development supported and provided assistance to 17 businesses during the month, and there was 1 ribbon cutting, and that was Lash Lounge on September 21st. Some additional highlights, of course, we had the Annapolis Songwriters Festival from September 14th through 17th throughout the city at different venues. Also here in Annapolis, Anne Arundel Economic Development with consultant Will Holmes Consulting put together and hosted a Money Maryland event at Maryland Hall. And this event was a combination of workshops, panels, and things of that sort for small business owners. It was rather successful. I had the opportunity to moderate 2 panels, and that was a lot of fun. One on procurement, the other on capital, access to capital. I also had the opportunity to go to Washington, D.C. for the Maryland Chamber of Commerce's Congressional Roundup on Capitol Hill. A number of Maryland congressional members provided updates on federal legislation and regulations and how it might impact the state. Towards the, I'll say towards the end of the month, spent a lot of time dealing with Tropical Storm Ophelia. I shouldn't upgrade the tropical storm to a hurricane, but we worked hand in glove with emergency management to make sure that the business community was updated with regard to the city's preparations and what preparations they needed to take. That was especially important for our parklets and our restaurants that have outside seating, whether it's a sidewalk cafe or the pilot parking lot dining program. And then after the tropical storm came and went, we were, in communication with businesses and also on the ground to try to assess damage and for emergency management. So we were working on damage assessment reports so that we could determine whether or not the damage was to an extent where state and or federal resources might be available to the local businesses. Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Rice. I apologize to interrupt. I'll let you get back to the main part of the presentation, but a question I have regarding Tropical Storm Ophelia responses, did any of the businesses have damage that required state aid and city aid?
The short answer is no. We were very lucky. There were definitely businesses that were impacted, but it was minimal.
Excellent. Was all of those businesses that were impacted, does the city provide direct aid to them, or is that all handled through their insurance companies and it's a well-oiled machine at this process?
It's a well-oiled machine with insurance.
Okay, thank you. I will let you continue unless Alderman Savage, you have any additional questions on Ophelia response.
No, Mr. Chair.
All right.
Yeah, there's more in here, but that pretty much sums up the highlights. One thing I will say, which is big for October, is of course, our two boat shows, the Powerboat Show, the 5th through the 8th, and the Sailboat Show, the 12th through the 15th. So we have a lot to look forward to this month as well, which has been equally as busy.
Excellent. Alderman Savage, do you have any questions for Mr. Rice?
Nope, sir.
Excellent. Something I'm going to add on, if you'll indulge me for your presentation, is we did have a brief email exchange today about the Economic Gardening Part 2. You mind filling us in on some of that and the general public if they may be interested?
Not at all. So we are gearing up for the second installment of the Economic Gardening Program. We are planning a webinar for interested businesses this month. We're working on a date for that. In November, we're projecting to have our application deadline for interested businesses, and then the actual kickoff of the program will be in January, shortly after the new year.
Thank you, Mr. Rice. If I may make a small request of when the date for the webinar is reached, if you send the committee members, Alderman Savage, Alderman Gay, and myself, an invitation, just in case we are available. It would be nice to come in. We don't need to talk on it because obviously it's about the program and the businesses, but I always like hearing how these things are going.
Absolutely. Will do.
Thank you, sir. Right. Barring any other questions from Mr. Rice, I say we conclude ID 7823. Hearing none. Mr. Rice, thank you, sir.
Thank you.
And that is the end of our agenda. Do we have any conversations or points for the general order?
No.
Hearing none, I conclude today's hearing of Economic Matters. Thank you all.
Thank you. Okay, I'd like to move to adjourn.
Apologize, I went out of proper order. The motion to adjourn has been made. I will second the motion. All in favor of adjournment?
Aye.
Aye, clearly. And now the Economic Matters Committee is over.